So the next vignette has Bianca and Craig. Let me do a brief introduction. So Craig Vander Zee, I had the pleasure of practicing law with both of these fine individuals. And so Craig is a partner at Tork & Mains, very experienced estate mediator, past chair of the OBA Trust and Estates section, and many other things. Bianca La Neve is an experienced litigator at We're Fools, and I've had the pleasure of dealing with her on many files, and she is always a pleasure to deal with. So over to you guys.
Thank you. Just for the diversity component of this presentation, Jordan always forgets to pronounce all the vowels in my name. It's La Neve. Okay, so Craig and I, with all the qualifiers and conditions set out by Stephen in the earlier vignette, we are going to try really hard to stay in role. So I'm playing the role of the lawyer, an agent for Wagner Zablosky, and I'm examining Craig, who's playing the role of Brad's dad, Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Phillips, just before the morning break, we discussed your background, and we were talking about how my client, Brad, your son, became involved in playing the role of Andrew on the Aunt Agnes television series. And we were discussing Brad's salary.
Well, there's a story there too, right?
Okay.
Because Brad is 8 years old and he goes, Dad, can I play soccer? And I'm saying, well, soccer's not going to get you into Harvard, right? So I said, well, do you want to be an actor? Because he was always around the house and he's acting. So I said, why don't we go out for, some of these shows? And, the kids at Degrassi High had already been chosen. And so we thought about this show. Now, they wanted a different actor, but through my efforts, he was able to get the role. Now, the kids from Degrassi High, they're getting $250,000 a year, and their parents are negotiating for hot meals at lunch. I'm negotiating for $1 million a year. So the fact that he got $1 million a year for 13 straight years was really my effort.
Mr. Phillips, it was $1 million an episode.
Oh, sorry, $1 million. Yes. You're right.
I don't want to downplay.
No, it was $130 million that I was able to negotiate for Brad.
Okay.
He's cute, but it only goes so far.
He was very cute, agreed. So after 10 seasons, Brad had been paid a total of $130 million.
Yeah.
And you invested all of Brad's money for him.
I did. I'm kind of a stock whiz. My friends say that I'm pretty good at it.
So by the year 2000, when Brad was magically 18 years old, he had $300 million.
He had $300 million, yes.
Okay, so
he had done nothing to do that except show up on the set and smile, right?
Okay. So I want to move now to the setting up of the trust. And I understand that in June 2000, there was a meeting attended by you, Helen, Brad, and the lawyer, Ms. Novice, and the accountant, Ms. Amy Tour.
That's correct.
Okay, and the purpose of the meeting was to discuss placing Brad's $300 million stock portfolio into a discretionary trust, correct?
Yes, we went there. We weren't sure. Obviously, we were relying on the lawyer and the accountant because they're the professionals.
Okay, but you didn't want Brad to have all this money and spend it all while he was away at school, did you?
Well, and actually, Brad was he was a really astute kid. I'm really proud of him. I know everything that's going on. I still love him very much. But he came to us and even said, Dad, I don't want to manage this money. I want to go to med school. Unfortunately, med school didn't work out, but... Okay,
well, so let's talk about that. So Brad trusted you. You would agree?
Sure.
To help him make this decision.
Yeah, sure. As his dad, I would hope to say that, yes.
And you wanted to make sure that Brad's money was prudently managed.
I certainly want it managed. I had done pretty well in the years before, so yes.
Okay, so the lawyer, Ms. Novice, she was your personal lawyer at the time.
She had done some things for me in the past, yes.
And you would agree with me that she wasn't Brad's lawyer at the time?
No. We had used someone else for his contracts with respect to the show.
Right, but to unpack that, the contracts for his show were negotiated when he was a minor, correct?
That's true.
So the lawyer used at the time wouldn't have been Brad's lawyer either?
That's correct.
Okay. So the accountant, Ms. Amy Tour, she was your accountant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you arranged this June 2000 meeting with these advisors?
Well, I mean, who else was going to make the call? We all wanted to go see the professionals, so yes, I made the call.
Okay, so you would agree that it wasn't Brad's idea to contact these two advisors and set up this meeting?
I don't think Brad even had the telephone number.
Okay. And it wasn't Brad's idea to take his $300 million and put it into a discretionary trust, was it?
Well, he didn't really, he just simply said, listen, I want to go to med school and I don't want to look after this. And it was a heck of a lot of money. So we had heard about this thing called a trust, and so we went to the professionals.
And you suggested putting the money into a trust to Brad, isn't that right?
I would have started the conversation, but I certainly didn't end the conversation. That was the professionals.
Well, let's delve into that.
There's a lawsuit against the lawyer, right?
Yes, commenced by our firm, so yes.
Yes.
So during this meeting with the advisors, would you agree that it was you and Helen that brought up the Brad's sister Giselle and making her a beneficiary of the trust?
Giselle has some special needs, and it was a very difficult situation, and Brad loved his sister. And yes, after having made $300 million for the family, essentially, we thought it was Brad's responsibility to help out his sister as well.
You told Brad that it was his moral responsibility to take care of his sister because she had cerebral palsy, correct?
I can't remember. I mean, that's 20 years ago. I can't remember if those are the exact words, but that certainly was my thought.
You told Brad that he had a moral responsibility to take care of his sister, isn't that true?
I might have used that language, yeah.
Okay. And you're the one that suggested to Brad that he should share his money with his sister.
It was a lot of money, and there was enough money to help out with his sister, and he wanted to. He loved his sister.
Okay, but you would agree with me that it wasn't Brad that suggested making Giselle a beneficiary of his trust. That was your suggestion.
I think it's probably fair to say it wasn't his suggestion.
Okay. And Brad also agreed at this meeting to have you appointed as the sole trustee of his trust.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, during this meeting with the advisors, isn't it true that the only option discussed for dealing with Brad's $300 million and taking care of Giselle was this discretionary trust?
I think that was really the only topic, but I'm not a tax guy. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. So we had spoken with the professionals, and this is what the professionals came up with. They had the documentation ready when we got there.
Mr. Phillips, you didn't ask your advisors to suggest any other alternatives to the trust, did you?
But that's why they get paid the big bucks.
You didn't ask them to suggest any alternatives, did you?
I don't recall if 20 years ago I asked the lawyer if they should do something other than the documents already prepared. But if there had been other options, I certainly would have hoped, and that's what this lawsuit is about, that they would have mentioned something.
So you recall at the meeting that Brad was prevented with trust documentation?
He was, the tax document was, I think there was a copy for each of us. And so, yes.
Okay.
The lawyer had it, and then, as I recall, the lawyer sort of circulated it around the boardroom.
Okay, so Brad was presented with a copy at that meeting?
He was, yes.
As you were and Helen?
That's right.
If I understand correctly. Okay, thank you. Now, did anyone explain to Brad at this meeting that he was giving up full control over his money by putting it into this
I'm
trust?
certain that he knew that, because he knew that he was going away to university and he wasn't doing anything. So he had to have known that.
Do you recall if anyone specifically told Brad during this meeting that he was giving up control of all of his money?
I'm sure that the lawyer would have put it in their reporting letter.
The reporting letter addressed to you?
Well, at that point in time, we all thought, at least I thought, that the lawyer was really looking out for everybody, not just me.
You agree with me, sir, that the reporting letter was addressed only to you?
The reporting letter was addressed to me, yes.
Okay. Now, do you recall if anyone...
But if the lawyer should have given it to Brad at the same time, then that's why we're having this litigation.
That certainly will be an issue in the litigation, sir. Thank you. Now, do you recall if there was any tax advice given to Brad?
I'm sure there was some mumbo jumbo about tax, but this is 20 years ago. I can barely remember what I was doing from a tax perspective 20 years ago. So I'm sure it was brought up. Can't remember what was said.
Okay. Now, do you recall if anyone explained to Brad at this meeting that he would have the opportunity to approve and consent to distributions made to his sister Giselle?
I think he knew that. Yeah, sure. I think he knew that.
Okay. And at the end of the meeting,
And it was in the trust too, the trust document.
okay, at the end of the meeting, Brad signed off on the trust documentation.
Yes.
And, but he wasn't given a copy of the trust documentation he signed, was he?
He didn't ask. He wanted to go out to the movie. I think it was one of the Star Wars movies that night, and he wanted to get out of the office.
Okay. During this meeting, at no point did you encourage Brad to go out and get his own legal advice or tax advice?
No, as I said, I thought no vice was the lawyer was looking out for everybody in the room at the same time. So no, I didn't think about it. If there was a stock question, I would have answered the stock question, but I think that's a legal question. So I think the lawyer should have handled that.
Well, I'm asking you, sir, a factual question. Did you suggest to your son that he should go out and speak to his own lawyer or accountant?
No, in the context of what I've just said, that it was my understanding that the lawyer was looking out for everybody and that the lawyer didn't suggest independent legal advice. No, I didn't think that I knew more than the lawyer. So no, I didn't say it.
Okay. Now, let's turn to the administration of the trust. You agree with me that your role as trustee is to act in the best interests of Brad and Giselle as the
Sure, I love my
beneficiaries?
son. I want to, see that he succeeds.
And you would agree with me that as the sole trustee of the trust, you made all the decisions regarding how to manage the trust funds.
I can't even count how many calls and emails I had with the lawyer, and the accountants.
Okay, well, let's park for now the issue of your consultations with them. My question is, wasn't it you, as the sole trustee, who ultimately made all the decisions for the trust?
I had to pull the trigger, yes,
Is
on trades and things like that.
You ultimately made all the decisions regarding the management of the
In
trust funds.
consultation with all the professionals around me
But you made all the decisions.
that are subject to the lawsuit.
Yes, but you made all the decisions, sir.
I certainly was involved in those decisions, yes.
Sir, I need a yes or a no. Did you or did you not make all the decisions regarding the
I
management?
want to go to Florida, but I'm not going to Florida right now. So just because you want me to say yes, I'm not going to say yes.
Who else was involved in making decisions for the trust?
Lawyers and other brokers and other people who provided me with information and accountants.
Did you delegate any of your decision-making authority to them?
I didn't delegate, no.
So you made all the decisions ultimately regarding the trust.
That's how you say it, not how I would say it.
We'll move on for now, Mr. Phillips. You would agree with me that you never consulted with Brad regarding decisions or regarding your management of the trust.
That kid, he was busy. He'd finished off his years at acting and he's going to med school and it doesn't work out. And then he's going to Harvard, and Harvard's really hard. I understand it's a really hard place to get through. And so I didn't bother him with those kinds of decisions, no.
So you didn't explain how you were managing the trust over the years to Brad?
I didn't think he really cared. Like, he never asked. He never said, Dad, what's up with the $300 million?
Well, you would agree with me that in January of this year, he did ask you what the value of the trust was, and you
Yeah,
refused
that's because
to
he
tell
got
him.
this lawyer that doesn't seem to be very good at what he does.
You would agree with me that in January of this year, he asked you what the value of the trust was, and you
He
refused
did
to
ask.
tell him.
He did ask. That's true.
Okay. And you would agree with me that until this litigation was commenced, Brad never had a copy of the trust agreement?
I don't recall him asking for it, so I don't know if he had a copy, but I didn't give him a copy.
Okay. Now, let's turn to some of the distributions made from the trust. I understand that other than tuition payments for Brad, you didn't give Brad any other money from the trust.
Well, tuition payments, you put a kid through, undergrad and then Harvard. I think it was like $1 million to $1.5 million, and for all of his expenses associated with all of his years of education, and we paid for everything, everything.
Sir, you would agree
He comes
that
home for Christmas, or he comes.
Sir, you would agree that the trust, everything was paid from the trust?
Yes,
Okay. And you've capped it at $1 million, $1.5 million for Brad?
about that.
Okay.
I'd have to look at the records, but yeah, that sounds about right.
It couldn't be more than $1.5 million.
I don't think so.
Okay. And payments for Giselle, including the house you bought for her that was then transferred to her outright, those couldn't have totaled more than $2 million.
I don't think so. I mean, again, I'd have to look at the records, but that sounds about right.
Okay. So as of today, you would agree with me that it's June 4th, 2019, yes, sir?
I would agree with you on that.
How much is there in the trust?
There's about $5 million in the trust. There's about $3 million in securities, and then there's the $2 million in this company, which is just going to shoot through the roof, called Spiffy Robotics. That's worth about $2 million. So I think I'll be able to get it back up to 50 or 100 million pretty soon.
So you agree with me that you started off with 300 million and now we're down to 5 million today?
Well, there's a lot of expenses along the way, right? You just don't do this for 20 years and end up with that amount, right?
Isn't it true, sir, that you made a number of bad investments over the years
Some people would have called them like insightful investments that just didn't work out.
in companies such as, all right, so we're talking companies such as BooCom and WebVan? Those investments were insightful investments, sir?
At the time, yeah. Didn't work out that way, but
Okay, and so we've established that there's $295 million that has been spent or lost from the trust.
it has been dispersed.
And of that amount, you've taken $9 million in compensation, correct?
It's a long time to have to manage a trust.
And isn't it true that Brad never consented to...
I had to pay taxes on that, by the way, too, right? So it's not really $9 million.
I understand, sir, but Brad never consented to you receiving $9 million from the trust
He
in
didn't
compensation.
oppose it either.
Did you provide him with any opportunity to consent or oppose the payment of compensation?
He really did know I was getting paid, so I figured if he wanted to know, he would just ask me.
So you never told him that you received $9 million in compensation?
I did not specifically answer a question that he raised to me about the compensation.
And you're now claiming the balance of the trust, the $5 million, as unpaid compensation.
I have a lot of bills.
All right, so this is a good time for a break. Why don't we break for lunch and reconvene in an hour?
Sure.
We stayed an hour.